Hey, everybody, welcome back. For anybody who's not familiar with me, my name's Beverly, and this is my channel where I just talk about stuff I'm figuring out and stuff I learned the hard way, sharing kind of my journey and my story. And today, specifically, there's been something on my mind for the last few days about kind of getting sucked into very polarized and confrontational type issues and picking a side and feeling like I have to stand up for that side's perspective or views or, whatever the case may be. Prior to 2020, I really hadn't paid any attention to politics, but towards the beginning of it, I really kind of fell down that rabbit hole of just watching every little thing. I mean, I was spending most of my free time watching to see who's doing what and what the arguments are for, and doing some research and stuff like that. And it was an experience that I learned a lot from. But I got to a point where I realized I was just giving all of my time and energy to something that I could only influence on a very small scale. Just me. I could get involved with my local politics, keep an eye, a better eye out, get a better feel for people, research in advance before, local elections, things like that. But as far as the broad scheme of things on a federal level, or much less what's going on in other countries that I don't even live in, it just seemed like a big time suck. I ended up my old phone died, and when I was trying to transfer pictures and stuff over to this one, I realized I had over 4,000 screenshots of news articles, posts, infographics, memes, anything that had to do with politics and what was going on at that point in time. I was just overindulging on the information. So last year, for kind of the beginning of 2021, I took a step back from that and started focusing more on um, I guess learning more about spirituality, read some good books, got into some really great groups where people were talking about things that kind of steered my attention in a different direction. So then that became kind of the new obsession of the year. Everything was spirituality. And it seems like so far this year, there's kind of a balance of kind of the mundane life that I'm living in this moment, where I have to pay bills on time and I have to do things, get things accomplished, make my bed, brush my teeth, do all that kind of stuff. And balancing it out with personal and spiritual growth without going head first into something that is more outside of myself. And I consumed a lot of information over the past few years, and it was beneficial that I learned it. I think I could have done it in a bit healthier of a way, because I really did get to a point where it was an obsession. It was an addiction almost. I couldn't look away from my phone. There was always a news article to look at, or there was always a podcast to listen to. There was always something external that was distracting me from what was actually right in front of me at the time. And it got to a point where I took a step back from that, and I had to really evaluate and prioritize where I was spending my time and my energy. And I have a lot of friends that are still very um, invested into the political climate, I guess. And that's great. And there are some people that I don't want to put this out there as like this is the one size fits all thing. It absolutely isn't. This is just me telling my story and my perspective. So please don't take it as I am bashing on people who are closely following politics or, whatever it may be. I'm just trying to share what I learned through the process and just bring some little insights that I got. So I'm not trying to bash on anybody. All of us are here to do something. And there are people who are here to deal with the political end of things. And I in no way want to make it seem like I don't appreciate that, because that needs to be dealt with. There's no way around that. But as far as what my own personal responsibility is, as far as what my own personal goal is in life or mission, for me that's not as big of a thing for me. I can't, I don't know if I could even go get on a school board. I don't have any kids, so I don't know that I could really help in that. I there's a limited amount of things that I can do politically outside of making sure that I'm voting for the people who I think are going to be the best fit, keeping aware enough of what's going on that I know if there's something I need to be, paying attention to, but not just getting sucked into it mindlessly and worried about everything everywhere all the time, because that is such a huge time and energy vacuum. It's kind of like a black hole. Once you get too close to it, you just get sucked in. And it's really hard, I think, to separate, because on one hand, I do have strong feelings about it. But on the other hand, it isn't my primary purpose for being here. Certainly to witness what's going on and to get the experience, because there is a lot of um, really big things that have been happening. And I think that from, if nothing else, a historic standpoint, it's an incredibly interesting time to be alive. There's a lot that's been going on, and you could get to see a lot of the back and forth in this side and that side, and how everything is kind of playing out, and how things are being in some ways manipulated, or other things being overhyped. Um, it's just very interesting strategically to see how everything has played out and how people receive that information, be it positive or negative. But I just wanted to say that, like, the reason I've stepped away from it really is to protect my own energy, because I was getting way too worked up about things that don't affect me directly. And that's not to say that I'm not compassionate for the people who are being directly affected by it. But I am here at this place in time with the background that I have for a specific purpose. So if that isn't something that I am supposed to be tackling, it makes sense to me to conserve my energy for what I am supposed to be doing, instead of just willy-nilly kind of throwing it everywhere and feeling completely depleted at the end of the day, because I'm worried about what's happening in this country or in that other part of our own country. It just becomes one of those things where it's very easy to get invested in things that you're not directly attached to. It's really easy to get frustrated or even angry or disappointed or saddened by things that are not directly in front of you. One of the big things that a lot of people talk about, and I found I have a very difficult time with doing it. It's something that I've been trying to work on. Being in the moment. If you're actually being in the moment that you're in, you're not dealing with what's going on in another country. You're dealing with what's right in front of you, what you can affect right there in the here and now. So to me, it was coming back to conserving that energy and not constantly allowing myself to get overwhelmed, frustrated, triggered, angry, and really kind of getting into one side of duality, where my way is right and everybody else is wrong, or our way is right and this group of people that I'm with, we have some insights that the other side doesn't, or we're better than them. There's just a lot of opportunity to get really sucked into playing sides. And I think that, we can have an argument for there are things that are important to put your foot down on and say, we're not going to allow this thing. But that should be on an individual issue. It shouldn't be our group has decided this is how it's going to be because we think we're right and you're wrong and poo poo on you. It just gets very confrontational and divided, and I don't like that. And it's not that I don't understand the thinking behind it, it's that there are two sides on everything. We're so divided, okay? And I reference this a lot in the last 6 months to a year. If you're familiar with the Matrix series, which probably you are, one of the things that I thought was very profound was that the leaders, the head architect or whatever, that started the Matrix, originally they talk about they had made a perfect system, but people rejected it because it was too perfect. And they assumed humans just loved to suffer, and therefore they made the system that way. But there were still people that wanted out. So they allowed for Neo, for this kind of program, this controlled exit point that is the one, that is Neo, to allow people in a controlled way to exit the system so that their entire system could remain intact and they would only lose a few. Basically, what do they call that? Controlled loss, something like that. And then they would just go out and wipe them out, in the real world. And the process would start again. To me, this idea was very profound because whether you think you're on the right side or the wrong side, the point is that there are two sides. And as long as there are two sides, there is not unity. There is just two sides bickering back and forth. And there are things that have two sides of an argument where I understand it's very difficult to try to come to some type of common ground, some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you can probably think of it yourself. Um, that kind of like compromise. There we go. Finding a compromise on some things is going to be really difficult because people have different perspectives. Take, pro-choice versus pro-life. As long as people have different perspectives on when life actually starts, there's going to be a really hard argument there. Because if somebody thinks that life doesn't start until 6 months in, they're going to say up until then, an abortion's fine. If somebody says it's at the moment of conception, at any given point in time, they're not going to be okay with it. So there are things that I understand that there's not always some type of compromise that can be easily found, but I think a lot of this comes back to putting our heads together and really figuring out for ourselves where we're at on these things and getting, in this specific instance, getting more information and more scientists who are really looking for that answer and are going to be honest about it when they find it and not have any type of agenda or being paid by, somebody that has an agenda, that could make some money or use it as a platform or something like that. Like, this is the kind of world that we live in, and we know this, that people can very easily be influenced to say and do things for their own benefit that don't benefit other people. And it's an unfortunate reality of this world that we're in. Um, but as long as there are these two sides always vying against each other, there's really no answer there. You know, I was looking around at the end of 2020 and leading up to the election, and I thought for sure we were going to go into a civil war. I'm like, no matter who wins, is the other side going to spark a civil war? I felt like this country was a powder keg waiting to blow. And I was glad that things calmed down a bit and that people could start like communicating again. That it simmered down and we got a little bit of distance from it and tempers weren't as heated because everybody thought that they were right. And that's a really hard place to be. And looking at it, my biggest concern was that would be what happened. And that the pattern just continues. It just recycles. It starts all over again. Because nothing gets solved that way. When has a war ever really permanently solved anything? Then you have underground, resistances that form and grudges that are held for generations, decades, centuries, maybe even millennia of we got our butts handed to us in this war and we're still wanting payback because we still have those values or those opinions. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. It's just that kind of concept of the snake eating its own tail. It just keeps going. The only way is to stop playing into this I'm right, you're wrong, and start actually having some decent conversations around things. And being open-minded and being really honest and genuine when we are communicating our thoughts and being understanding of where other people are coming from. So I got off on a little side trail there. But the other reason that I stepped away from it a bit was for my time. My energy was number one because I was feeling very angry, very hostile a lot of the times around political topics. I was very opinionated. Wasn't really too vocal with like strangers and stuff like that. I've never really been that way. But with the people who I knew, I had very strong opinions on things. So I needed to protect my energy first. But the other thing was, it was my time. I was just spending so much time focused on external things that weren't right in front of me, that in the broad scheme of things I had very little impact on. And it really came down to there are better ways I could be using my time. I could be reading books and learning things. I ended up listening to audiobooks last year and went through, I think, like 10 books. A couple of them I listened to a second time. Actually, one I listened to a third time even. That was the most I'd read in years. And it was a much better use of my time. I was learning things. I was listening in the background while I was outside doing yard work and things like that. And I was educating myself and expanding my mind while doing work. And it was a much better use of my time. And then that started developing into more of an interest in my own personal and spiritual development. And it occurred to me at one point that the only way that any of us can actually really change the world in a positive way is to deal with our own selves. As we get healthier, as we get less egotistical or less unworthy or whatever our specific struggles are that we have to work through and to process and deal with, the healthier and the wiser we can get, the more in control of ourselves, the more self-aware and aware of this existence that we're in and what our purpose is and where we fit into the world and what we give back to the world and the best ways in which we can then outreach in some way, no matter how grand and glorious it may seem to be, or however small it may seem to be, and kind of in the background doing good work. it really, that part doesn't matter. It never should matter, because if it does, then that's the ego talking of, oh, I want some high lofty, status. Or it could be an unworthiness thing of, I just want to stay in the background and hide and never like really truly come into my own power. So the what it looks like should never be part of our thinking in when we're figuring out our own gifts and talents that we bring to the world, our own insights, and it shouldn't be judged against other people. But the more that we work on ourselves individually, the more we are influencing the people immediately around us, maybe to question how much energy or time or whatever they're expending in different areas of their life, or how to, kind of step out of that egotistical place of always needing to be right and always needing to like assert your opinion over other people. As we start to do this, other people start to notice. You can subtly influence the people around you in positive ways just by being a healthier, more self aware person, consciously living their life and growing and developing and always pursuing their own personal best life, the best that they can be, the best that they can bring to the world. On an individual level, we all have to work on ourselves, and we all have to realize where we are falling short, where we are doing well, where we are fearful, and where we're, even with the people we're around, if we're not putting up good enough boundaries, things like that. The better we get in our own self-development, the more we can actually influence the world. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, this is just me. This is my personal experience and where I'm at with it right now. Not saying that that's going to be the same for everybody. But the more you are spending in that now moment and dealing with what is in front of you right now, dealing with where your emotions are at right now, dealing with where your mood and your attitude is right now in that moment, the more you really can change the world, because it becomes little beacons of light popping online. One candle lighting another candle, that's lighting another candle, that's lighting another candle. And before you know it, it spreads. And maybe it reaches the people who can do something bigger. Either way, there's going to be a lot more peace and calm in that moment that you can enjoy, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're monitoring yourself. You're keeping your you're keeping your vibes high. You're keeping your mind in healthy places and not letting it go off to all these dark things. And this is another thing that I really had to think about and focus on, is where I was putting my mind was often in very dark places. And then I got confused as to why I was getting so depressed and being so grumpy all the time. Well, my mind was in a really dark place. And that can apply to any kind of thing that you're watching. It could be a TV show that you really love, but it's like super kind of dark and violent and stuff. And like, I get it. I like to play video games, and some of them are pretty dark and violent. So I have to consciously take into consideration, what do I want my mind to be kind of wading through? Do I want to be walking barefoot through a mountaintop, high vibing, listening to some like, awesome, tranquil, kind of serene music? Or do I want to be wading through marshes mentally, bogs, quicksand? And it's not to say that you can't still do that. Like, you have to weigh that out for yourself. Like, for me, I still play some of the video games, but I am a lot more consciously aware of what I am looking at and what I am seeing and processing when I am playing those games. And if I start feeling like it's getting me in a weird headspace, I have to take a step back from it. And I have to go deliberately do something, or um, talk to somebody who's higher vibe, go put well, right now it's cold as heck, so I can't go put my feet in the grass without freezing them off, but go out and stare at the stars or something like that to kind of like bring me back to a more centered space where my brain isn't in kind of that darkness all the time. To me, politics was very dark. There were some highlights here and there, but it was just something that was keeping me feeling like I was in darkness, looking for a light at the end of the tunnel, kind of fumbling my way through with, my hands out, trying to like feel for walls and things like that. And I just decided I didn't want to stay there, that I wanted to be happy, that I wanted to be able to laugh again, that I wanted to be able to go out and just have a good day, just have one of those days where I'm just high vibing, can't get me down, I'm just rocking it out. So for me, it was really just walking away from something that personally felt like it wasn't benefiting me. It was taking from me and not in good ways, and it was making me feel depressed, you know, um, confused, sad, just a general disappointment. And I think politically, everybody has been politically disappointed. you know, Especially in the last, however many years, there's definitely been political disappointments. And the problem is we have to prioritize what is affecting us immediately and how we are affecting the world immediately in the now. And if we're sitting there and constantly scrolling for the latest news article, especially if you're not looking at both sides of the argument, I feel like that's a really dangerous trap. Echo chambers are they're just a trap. They're an absolute trap. If you're going to look at one side of media because you think you agree with it, look at the other side anyway. Or not media, politics. I mean, you can tie media in with that. Like if you're consuming, CNN, look at Fox sometimes, and vice versa. Know what the other's saying, see the other side of the coin, because this is where echo chambers become a really dangerous place, is that there's not opposing arguments that are making your mind think about alternate perspectives on things. It's like I use the example of, if I'm sitting on one side of a Rubik's Cube and you're sitting on the other side and we describe it to each other, we're probably not seeing the same thing. And everything is like a Rubik's Cube, where there are so many twists, turns, different perspectives, different angles, and you really have to be willing to sit there and take the time to do that. Otherwise, you don't know if you're right. And really, even afterwards, how do any of us know what is correct, what is accurate, what is factual, if we haven't experienced it for ourselves? And even some of the things we've experienced for ourselves or seen with our own eyes, how do we know? How do we really trust it? My eyes have deceived me. It really comes back to your intuition and really honing your intuition, honing your ability to read into the energies that are around you when things are happening right in front of you. I think people get too hung up on this concept of knowing what is right or what is factual. Just just looking at it logically. With as much as information is moving at this point in time, and as easy as it is to manipulate information, bury information, all that kind of stuff, it just comes back to, how do we know any of it? And does it matter what is in the past? Obviously it does. It's part of the history. But the biggest focus should be on the now moment. If we're in the now moment, then what happened 50, 100 years ago? It's part of history. It can educate our actions going forward in that now moment. But usually in the now moment, there's not a lot of history that you need to know other than personal relations, how to interact with people, how to go about your life and do it well, how to tap into your own potential. I think that the priority needs to shift back from the external to the internal, and in from what is going on somewhere else, what happened in the past, what might happen in the future, and taking it back to the now moment. Again, it's my perspective. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. That's just where I'm at. And some people get it, and some people have other perspectives on it, and that's fine. Their mission may be very different from my own. You know, um, there are definitely people who are, through their experiences that they've had, are very much set up in a position where they can work on some of those things. Where they have a very unique set of skills, a very unique background, career history, things like that, that they are uniquely set up specifically to deal with things like politics. And those people, that's probably what their mission is, I would assume. So I'm not judging them, I'm not dissing on them, anything like that. I'm just saying, for me personally, I needed to step away from it for a time and work on myself and get back to this place of being the best I can be despite whatever's going on in the world around me, and just trying to keep moving forward as if it's already solved, as if it's already done. Because really, and so many people believe that there is, kind of a divine orchestration in play, or um, people word it a few different ways, but basically kind of a design plan in play, where this is however it's playing out is how it's supposed to play out, even if we don't understand. We can look back throughout our lives and see that, things that we thought of years ago as horrible mistakes ended up teaching us some of the most profound lessons that catapulted us into the future. And you can do the same thing with history, current events. It's all a microcosm of the macrocosm, or vice versa, however that works. They're the same. They're running on a similar um, kind of parallel line. What's going on in the world is oftentimes similar to what's going on an individual level. The same lessons that we're learning, the same uh, things that are trying to come through for us. Um, I think that part of the frustration for me in looking at the political things is that there's this push that we have to be the ones who force something to happen. And oftentimes it's said right alongside the whole like divine plan type thing. And to me, the two contradict each other. You know, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. and it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen. So the people who do feel like they have to go out there and do stuff, and great example, the trucker convoys that are going on, the protests up in Canada and a lot of other countries where they've done it. The people who feel like they're called to do that, that's something they need to do, it probably is. It's probably their part in all of this. But it's not for people to sit there and start pointing fingers at other people and say, if you're not doing this, then you're bad. Or if you're not doing this, you must not support it. Or you're not, patriotic enough. Or you're not, you know, you must be spineless if you don't get out there and do this. And it's like, that's where the issue comes in for me, is that everybody has their own path. And one size does not fit all. This would be a very boring world if we were all that kind of cyborg zombie type, everybody's the same, everybody's supposed to do the same thing. We're diverse for a reason, because there's a need for different people with different skill sets, different kind of callings in life, and things that they bring to the table and can give to the world, that gives it this beautiful variety. And it is beautiful. So for me, it's really just been about coming back to myself, realizing that the most important thing for me to spend my energy and my time on right now, and it may not be the same for the future, but for right now at least, is to focus on myself and my own development, get my own thoughts straight, get my own issues dealt with, get my own, um, you know, character flaws or traumas dealt with, so that going forward I can just continue to just always be trying to do my best and be my best self. And that is how I think that collectively we would change the world. If we're all trying to be our best in whatever our specific mission is, then we're going to succeed in whatever that end result looks like. And it may not look like what we think it's going to look like. But where would be the fun of that? So anyway, I just wanted to explain that, because I know that at times there's been some confusion around why I've taken such a big step away from it. And I just really kind of wanted to give my thoughts on it, because I feel like there's a lot more people out there that are kind of in the same place with it. And so maybe it'll encourage those people that they're not alone, and that they don't have to feel guilty about not continuing to invest a lot of time and energy into that. And maybe for others it'll be, something that makes you stop and think about where you're spending your time and energy. And for others it may be that, your mission is on the political side, and that you just hadn't really taken the time, or maybe hadn't heard a good enough explanation from somebody else's perspective. And hopefully you can gain some insight from it as well. And maybe you're just completely neutral on everything, and you just needed to kill like 40 minutes of your time. Whatever it may be, I just wanted to bring it up, address it, talk about it a little bit, and hopefully that makes sense. So, all right. Well, I'll let you go. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you next time.